Hello everybody and welcome to a place called The Haven in West Sussex. Now, will this be a haven for running? Unfortunately, the Blue Ship Inn, which is behind me, is closed at the moment, but it's a lovely summer's evening. So I thought I would do a shoe-off test incorporating an Adios 6 initial look. I've actually run in it once, but I want to give it another go and I've had to relace it a bit. So the Adios is a shoe that I've had a great history with. I've had now, I think, 9 versions this will be. I had 2 of the pre-boost versions going back about 10 years ago. And this orange pair here is the first boost version. I actually wore that model of the shoe for a 2:53 marathon back in 2016. And in that period, it used to be my racing shoe for every road race. So I'm always keen to try out the Adios. One thing that I also have to say about Adidas is that they never do any shoes past the UK 12.5 in their Adizero range. And I'm really perhaps a 13 or 13.5. So I'm all struggling a bit. So you may have to bear with me when I sort of make the usual gripe about, is this shoe actually too small for me? But as I said, I did do that 2:53 marathon 5 years ago, so it can't have been too bad. Right, let's give you a little history of all the Adios shoes that I've got with me now. So here are my collection of Adios shoes that I've got with me. In fact, these are the ones I've still got. So let's go from the left here. This is the Adios 1, which is the first boost version. There were 2 previous versions which were non-boost. That was the one I did the 2:53 marathon in 5 years ago. I also did a 79-minute half marathon, a 36-minute 10k, 17-minute 5k, that sort of stuff. So this one here is the 4. Now this is the last version that was completely all boost. Then we move over to Adios 5. This version had a bit of light strike there at the top with a boost in the heel. And we've got the Adios Pro. This isn't really what I call a real Adios, but I'll put that in because it's got the Adios name. And then here is the Adios 6. Now you may be wondering what happened to the 2 and the 3. Well, they turned out a bit too small for me and I ended up giving them to Steve Way. And I think the Adios 3 that I gave him ended up in 9th place in the Comrades Marathon. So put it to good use. I think he actually then got 3rd place in the 4%. So maybe that just shows that the Adios shoes were good, but maybe not that good. So if we now just leave ourselves with the Adios 1, 4, 5 and 6 here. Now I think the first thing of interest to know is how much the stack height is increased in the 6 here. I measured this in my one at 40mm, which I think is a bit more than the standard, which I think is about 32. But if you compare that with that one, which is the Boost 1, look at how much more stack that is. Now I think my fellow YouTubers have covered the Adios 6 specs pretty well, so I don't think I'll dwell on them too much, but I'll give you a very quick overview how I see them. So for comparative purposes, I've got the Adios 6 on the left foot and the Adios 5 on the right foot here. Now the number of eyelets has actually decreased by 1. We've only got 6 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 compared to 7 on the Adios 5 there. Now on the Adios 6, I've actually used the 3 wider eyelets. Now interestingly, that doesn't actually seem to give you a wider fit. I've actually had a problem trying to get myself in, so I actually used the wider fit to bizarrely actually tie in the tongues closer together, and that increasing in turn has actually given me a bit more room there, because I think the uppers actually come up a bit, which actually allows a bit more room for my toe. As you can see there, I haven't really got a huge amount of room, so I wanted to be quite snug across the midfoot. This is going back to my earlier comment that really a 12.5 in an Adidas is not quite long enough, but I can kind of sort of improvise it and kind of try to manufacture it into a 13 that they don't do, or the 13.5 that perhaps will be ideal. But I think that should hopefully then allow me to run in that without actually ramming against the top there. As you can see, if I put my fingers in, that's a very meshy, breathable material at the top there, so that's rather welcome. The tongue feels a bit neoprene, and when I did my first run in it, found they got quite hot, so that's one area that I thought was a bit poor. It is actually a gusseted tongue, which is always quite welcome, I think. Quite a lot of structure at the back actually. That's quite a rock hard heel cup there, which is quite unusual now in sort of lightweight shoes, and quite a lot of cushioning there in the heel cup, and this rather strange flap here, which I'm not entirely sure what it's really doing. In the side view, you've got the premium Light Strike Pro material here, and then you've got the normal Light Strike underneath. Now Light Strike Pro is the material that's used entirely within the Adios Pro, so it's the first time Light Strike Pro has appeared in a shoe other than the Adios Pro as far as I know. And if we compare stacks there, you can see that the Adios 6 isn't quite as tall as the Adios Pro. So here's the back of the Adios 6 here, and got the familiar continental rubber, but a rather different configuration to previously. Now you've got those sort of more grooved areas, and I think, as you can almost see there, it's going to be very easy to get little stones tucked in. I've already had a few that I've had to yank out, so that's not so good. But interesting how on the inside of the shoe you've got like a full rubber there, whereas a lot more minimalist on the outside of the shoe. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The familiar torsion system, so the shoe is quite rigid. If I try and bend the shoe, there's not much going on. This is definitely a lot like the Rebel 2 that I've been wearing of late. So what I'm going to do now is run in each of these 5 different shoes on this 1.5 mile lap that I've identified and see which one I prefer, and indeed see how they compare. Now I think I'll start off with the Adios Pro, because this isn't really a shoe off, but I think I'm going to try to run about a 7-minute mile pace to keep it honest and see if we get some sort of comparative stats on it. But I'm more interested in just how they feel on foot. Well, from my initial impressions of the Adios 6, it is still very much a firm shoe, but will this high stack feel different to the earlier versions? And I think also the interesting question for me, what I need to find out, is what actually is the purpose of the Adios anymore? Because originally when I first got them, it was very much a racing shoe, anything from 5k up to the marathon, and I did all my intervals in it. Now I'm thinking that the sort of feedback, it's a good general trainer. People aren't sort of looking to use this in marathons anymore, and indeed, you know, people would think, well, how did Tim ever run a marathon in that Adios 1? There's nothing to it. But that's part of the quandary these days, isn't it? With these high stack shoes, people are saying, well, I can't run a marathon in that because it hasn't got 40 centimeters of stack. That's rather crazy, because 5 years ago we were all going around in 20mm shoes and thinking these are nice and cushioned. So what's happened in 5 years? You know, have we all become a bit softer, in inverted commas? So let's see how these feel and report back later. Okay, run done in the Adios Pro. Actually, compared to those other Adios shoes, I think I'm going to find later, they feel quite soft actually. I think they increased stack. Quite nice little circuit. I hadn't quite realised that the first part was downhill and the rest of it was uphill, so I didn't study the map very well. Never mind, can't do all the planning right. But I averaged about 650 pace, just under 10 minutes of running, so nice little circuit. Right, let's put the Boost 1 version on now. These were my favourite shoes from basically 5 years ago, so I'm interested to see how they shape up now, having not really worn them for a few years. Okay, run done in the Adios 1 Boost version there. That was my old favourite shoe from 5 years ago. Perhaps, what's the saying? Perhaps seeing those shoes for rose tinted glasses, very low to the ground, and didn't feel like there's much cushioning at all. Not a huge amount of sort of help either, although my quad was starting to twinge a bit. So what I think I'll do now is go straight to the Adios 6, just run around in that one and maybe skip the 4 and the 5, and then see how they compare. So it's going from a high stack shoe to a low stack shoe to sort of one in the middle. And this is the one we're obviously interested in, isn't it? Okay, the Adios 6 on, and instantly there's a huge difference in feeling between the Adios 6 and the Adios 1. I think the 4 and the 5 are quite similar to the 1 in terms of how they feel. That extra stack height feels like a completely different shoe. I think because my feet are now a bit warmed up, I'm not feeling so much room that I was, room in inverted commas, so they do feel a bit cramped up now, so I'm not sure that's going to affect me. Right, let's get on with this run, and I'll call that the last one of the day, see if we can get through this, see if we can do about 10 minutes. It's about 650 pace, my marathon pace, on a sort of a gently sloping course, and a gently sloping course I'll back up for 1.5 miles. Nice little test. Right, let's get going. Okay, run done in the Adios 6. I felt completely different to the Adios 1. They just definitely felt the high stack height. I'm also feeling that the shoe comes up shorter than the Adios 1, but I'm also mindful that the Adios 1 does seem to come up the longest of all the Adios 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's my toe about there. So I've really got, not even half a thumb width, is it? It's barely a quarter. And it's, I think because I got them so tight across here, it feels a bit tight through there. The left foot not too bad, maybe just got a fraction more room. So I'll definitely say of the Adios 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the Adios 1 I always felt like it fitted the slightly longer, just a few extra mils maybe, it makes all the difference for me. I think of those 3 shoes, the Adios Pro, the Adios 1 and the Adios 6, the Adios Pro was by far the most comfortable shoe. Okay, I did run them up one first, and I've got my quad feels a bit of a niggly now, so that's why I've abandoned the 4 and the 5. But I might just run up the road just slowly with the 4 and the 5 just to see how they are, give you a bit of comparison, because obviously people who've got the Adios 4 or 5 want to know whether it's worth getting the Adios 6. I couldn't help thinking when I was running around there, well, what purpose does the Adios 6 serve now? Is it a racing shoe? Well, no, not really, because you've got the Adios Pro, haven't you? And then you've got the Adizero Pro as well, is their sort of more expensive carbon plated offering, which they seem to be made huge numbers of, and that's a shoe that's perhaps was probably the most disappointing shoe of last year for me. I couldn't see the point of it. It's typical Adidas. They make a load of shoes that no one wants to buy, and the shoes that people do want to buy, they don't make them. But yeah, I'm sure that they make a lot of money. I'm sure they could make a lot more if they made a few more wise business decisions. But there you go, that's their decision to make. I'm interested in their running shoes, and they don't do the shoe that is actually big enough for me. So yeah, the Adios 6, it's nice, but it just doesn't really fit me, to be honest. It's at least half a size too small, but it does feel like it would be very nice if it does. But what the purpose does it serve? I think, to be honest, it's just like a tempo shoe these days. I mean, with so many marathon races on the cards now, and this is quite heavy. It's almost 300 grams, I think 297 in my size. Well, the highest size I can get. So yeah, a bit of an odd one. I just put the 4 and the 5 on just to compare them. So rundown in the Adios 4 here, they aren't any better for length, right up against the ends there. So not particularly enjoyable run on the Adios 4. I just did a third of a mile up the road and back again. Felt very low to the ground, not much help there, and they felt too small. So definitely, although the Adios 6 aren't quite big enough, I don't think, they definitely felt a lot better, and the Adios Pro better still. And I definitely prefer the Adios 1 to the 4. I'll just give the Adios 5 now a go for comparisons. Okay, Adios 5 done. I've actually got a bit more room here in the toe box than the Adios 5. Maybe because of that slightly extra room in the Adios 5, it actually felt quite nice. And I think of all the Boost numbered shoes, that one probably actually fits me the longest, apart from the Adios Pro. So, funny how perceptions change. I think I might reconfigure the Adios 6 back to the original lacing and do the same run, just to give myself a bit more width across the top there, and see if that makes any difference. But on the face of it, I would say the Adios 6 may be coming in slightly shorter than the Adios 5, and then the Adios 4 shorter still. The Adios 2 and the 3 were so short that I haven't got them anymore, and the Adios 1 and maybe Adios 5 are kind of quite similar. So that's interesting in itself. Okay, so I've had to go reconfiguring the laces back to the default configuration, which is not using the 3 wider eyelets on both sides. So back to standard, those 3 there that I've taken back out again. Right, I'm gonna have one more run and see if they feel any different. They now feel a bit loose, bizarrely. I think my feet, because I haven't been running for a few minutes where I've been relacing them, are slightly contracted, so we'll see how they feel. Okay, I've done that extra run in the Adios 6, and yeah, I think perhaps the default configuration is slightly better. I'm feeling my right little toe a bit, but I think that's because I've just done so many runs now. So what do I think of all those shoes? Well, I think of all those ones, I think the Adios Pro is my favourite. I think partly because that seems to actually fit the slightly longest. I think the Adios 1, although it is very low to the ground, does actually fit okay, just about. And interesting, the Adios 5, if anything, comes up slightly longer. So I think the Adios 1 and 5, the ones that sort of can get away with. The Adios 4 felt too short. The Adios 2 and 3 had already dismissed as being even shorter. And the Adios 6 is kind of in the middle. I just feel it comes up slightly shorter than the Adios 5. So if you're thinking of going up half a size, it might not be a bad idea. Of course, I don't have the option, which is a bit of a shame, but there you go. So what is the Adios 6 now? Well, it's a very interesting question. It didn't feel anywhere near as low to the ground as the Adios 1, 2, 3, 4. And the Adios 5 felt like it was on the way to having a bit more stack, and then it's almost completed full circle with the Adios 6. So I think if it did fit me better, and or I'd just give it another go, I think it will be a shoe that I'll be looking to take for some sort of fast to work. I think you'd almost use it as an everyday trainer if you're into using sort of fairly lightweight shoes, because it has that sort of nice sort of, as I say, combination of cushioning. But yeah, it's just an odd shoe. I mean, what is the Adios now? The Adios was always the marathon racing shoe, but there's no way that I would want to use that as a marathon racer now. Although, having said that, having picked it up for £77, it could be a budget option, and then you probably will be okay. But I think these days you'd probably be giving away a couple of minutes over these other shoes. Although, having said that, in the 3 that I actually ran in, I actually did manage the same time, but I need to look at the stats, because I did feel that each one was getting impressively harder as I was getting tired, and I think the Adios Pro would have been the easiest one. So yeah, interesting shoe, the Adios 6. I just wish, as I said, that I could actually feel like a bit more comfortable in it. I think it would be a great, fairly sort of cheap performance shoe, as it always has been, but not the racer of days of old. I think there's just too many better options these days. So I hope you found this interesting, and look forward to seeing the next one then. Bye.